Hi, I'm John Lewis, and I'm really sorry that I'm not with you today, but I'm looking forward to being with you tomorrow and the next day for our workshop together. Here in my office, I like surrounding myself with memorabilia from the past. My old model railroad trains from my childhood, my days of flying with Mission Aviation Fellowship in Congo. But right behind me here is my favorite corner. This is kind of a memorial to my father. Arthur Lewis was a first lieutenant in the 8th Air Force during World War II. He was a bombardier in B-17s. And behind me here are his medals and a lot of things that he collected over his lifetime, including a model of all the different kinds of planes that he actually saw during his 34 missions flying in the 94th Bomb Group. The $1 Million Baby was his most famous airplane. And I remember stories growing up in my childhood my dad telling me about what it was like to be a bombardier in this airplane. And having a crew around him at 28,000 feet, flak all around him. Even one particular incident where he had to bail out over Belgium and making it back finally to England. A lot of interesting stories from World War II. So why am I telling you all this about World War II? Because I feel that there's a story that I would like to use as a great introduction for our seminar tomorrow. Before the U.S. entered the war, England was very much involved in night bombing. They used these Lancaster bombers as a means of defensive action, but they would send them out at night one by one to try to hit these targets. Unfortunately, they weren't very effective because they couldn't always see their target. But they chose night bombing because it was the safest way to stay away from the very powerful German Luftwaffe. When General Hap Arnold from the U.S. Army Air Force was involved in bringing the U.S. into the war, he decided that night bombing might be the safest way to go, but it certainly wasn't going to win the war. And so he made a very important decision to switch to daylight bombing. And to do that, he needed an airplane and also a strategy that would support that kind of daylight bombing. The B-17 was definitely one of the key airplanes for that. And being called the Flying Fortress, it was an airplane that had the kind of armament for each individual plane. And then when they flew in these huge formations, they provided the best kind of protection they knew how against the Germans. And without question, today I think, attribute to the 8th Air Force and that daylight bombing effort one of the key elements that won the war for the Allies. So what does all this have to do with mission aviation? The topic for the next 2 days of our workshop is called "You Can't Lead Like You Used to." The reason is that I believe the last 10 to 20 years have seen a dramatic change in the way the mission field operates from the way it was years ago. And just like General Hap Arnold decided that they needed a different kind of a strategy going forward, I believe we need a different kind of strategy for mission aviation leaders on the field as we think about how to engage this resource for God's kingdom. There are 4 different topics that I hope we can grapple with during these next 2 days. The first one is leading the multinational team. Without question, our teams on the field are becoming more diverse with people from lots of different cultural backgrounds. How does an aviation manager grapple with that? How does he manage staff expectation? How does he manage the kind of training that is necessary to support those teams? The second topic that I hope we can talk about is leading in the face of new risk factors. We've certainly been talking about risk for a long time, but it's usually been related to the technical part of mission aviation, risk related to the airplane and flying the airplane. But I want us to grapple with the idea of assessing risk in the non-aviation domain. the anti-American sentiment, the threat of terrorists, and how those things impact our staff and bring stress and possible burnout. How does an aviation manager assess that risk and deal with it in an effective way? A third area that we'll talk about is leading the ministry impact. We all know that our client today is very different from years ago when it was primarily the Western missionary. Today, with the national church leaders and sometimes NGO leaders, our ministry impact has to be thought about differently. Some of those people have never thought about how to use the airplane effectively. And so the aviation manager has to engage in a dialogue process that before was never really necessary. Finally, the last topic is leading the process of regulation adherence. We all know that many of our programs are being forced towards commercial operation, Part 135 types of service. And what does that mean? What does that look like? How do we still maintain a mission element when we have a commercial enterprise that we're trying to manage? So we've got lots of questions related to that as well. For every one of these 4 topics, I intend to give some of the elements of the challenge, kind of thinking it through a little bit, and then presenting some key questions that I would like to have you discuss around some table time, and where we think through these issues together, and then finally wrap up with a compilation of your ideas and thoughts and see if we can't come together with some conclusions that can truly be beneficial for the future. So I really am looking forward to these next 2 days, and I hope those of you who choose this particular track for your workshop will find it also to be equally beneficial. See you there tomorrow.